He's an alpha male, so we've never really talked that much before. So. Yeah, that's what he's saying. Good smile, good eye contact, something. See that there's nothing belligerent about me. Not completely comfortable with people around here in this neighborhood. It's not his fault. He's probably the nicest person in the neighborhood. But the last time I saw him, he was in for trail. He was in acting mode. One day I came up to him and he started going on about Hinduism, and no one has a will of their own. You might as well accept it, and that's what he learned from taking acid and other psychedelics all his life. And it's just a lot. I said to him, what? I've studied the Bhagavad Gita. I get, the concept that you're using, but it's not the only way to think about life, because it eliminates the possibility of ethical reasoning. It's like sin, karma, all that. It's basically just says, que sera, sera. Do what you need to do. And I don't know about you, but I don't think it means that we all have to be the judge and executioner of every other person. But I don't think that everything people does is the will of the supreme awesomeness of nature. I think people can behave when they're free and happy, and they can behave a certain way when they're trapped or misled or deceived or harmed or shocked. And that something like the latter can be so prominent because some people learn how to exploit it in ways that most people would not care to learn about. And we should just be so lucky to get as satisfied as we can with a world that we never really want to understand. And that could also be. And that the religions and whatnot are there to pacify us and to make us think that we have some control by admitting that in many respects that might not even be possible. And to go about lives of, where you can expect to try to control things even though you never can. And someone who always has to try to control things, who really can't, is not a regular human. They're often an alcoholic type personality, right? Or need to convert everything into a type of theater. So they're playing a role and you're playing a role and nothing else. Everyone is and does what they're supposed to. So that when they don't, they're telling you that you're the person that gets to get sacrificed because you get to pay the cost of them being the way they need to be by having certain things taken from you because you don't want to be a part of the plot, which will be the place that you're laid when they're done with you. Okay? And they're not just slaying the bull, they're slaying the entire audience. And they themselves are lost, but have found a way to have a new life by becoming someone else. Right? Does that sound nice? Does that sound like what you think you want people to be like? Does that sound like the most unfortunate explanation of negative human behavior? What if all violence is people that are trying to accommodate certain amounts of shock and violence and denial, and have played roles, say many of them, that don't even serve them well? I might have played roles in my life like the scapegoat that don't even serve me well because I haven't found any other role to play. And it'd be nice to find a way where you didn't have to play any roles at all. To anybody. When I met sociopathic women in my life, which most women that wanted to have sex with me or tried to use me in that way, the thing about narcissists, they never need to know anything about you, but they'll always claim to know everything they need to know. And they can't understand why you're not happy with that. And you might say, well, I should have tried to play a different role in their lives, But one thing's for sure, you had to play a certain role. And you just end up being that guy all the time, that guy all the time, And maybe that's it. Maybe you just have to play different roles and better roles. How do you ever get out of the game? Well, I think by living a life of no violence. I'm a little scared. I've had a lot of fears generated over the last years and few weeks and days and hours about my capacity to go on in life. Things people maybe say to me, go on, get a job. I do plan on generating some more money, but I want it to be joyful. I want it to be something I really want to do. I said to my mom, quite frankly, I've done enough with my mind that I'm sure I'm ready to do something for someone. It's just a matter of finding what it is. I'm sure I'll find it at some point. The point is that I'm now starting to look for that. At the age of 50, I've just had other things to do. And my mom's the only kind of person I would say that to, as a kind of, in a sense, maybe a bit of an apology for being the way I am. But, let's go and, so yeah, nice high-pitched sound kind of sometimes you get when you're talking to your spirit, talking with your spirit. That's good. I feel. Other times I've heard sounds and it could be an augury or something. But just as I was talking about that sense of people going into portrayal, and so I can talk about, when I've been injured, when I've been singled out for particularly negative treatment or negative reinforcement, these things are usually at play on some level, either specifically to do with you or just in the background and you happen to stumble onto, somebody's unhappy day. But unhappy or not, you know that you would never treat someone that way, the way that person's treating you, right? And you might say to yourself, how could anyone treat anyone that way? People are looking on like, have you been treated this way? You want to ask the audience, have you ever been treated like this? No, not me. Why me? Why me? Why me? If I treated you that way, what would you do? I wouldn't allow that. That's an alcoholic state of mind that's possessed by people I've met throughout my life, men and women, who aren't even drinking. Do you understand? They're driving a bus. They're navigating a ferry. They're my mother or my father. They're the police officer on the side of the road. They're the guy, installing wires over here. They're people running schools and spiritual systems and teachers, professors. And then those are just the ones you can notice that pop out. And if you're someone that notices these things, maybe you are a little bit in danger because you're a different kind of person. That means that your subconscious is still, despite any amount of trauma we might attribute to human beings in general, if not myself in particular, is still got a level of sensible communication with the neocortex. In other words, you can feel pain. You can feel enough pain that you would say, it's never really going to go away. There's something that had to change in my brain living in this world that I'm never going to feel good about. I wish I could just undo all of it. Because we spend most of our lives when we're most vulnerable before we know anything, and most people never know really much of anything about the world, going along with it and accepting everything and just accepting all the explanations for all of the pain and all of this and all of that. And don't you ever get sick of it? Don't you ever just want to throw that shit out and just be honest with yourself? That the biggest deal in the world is not the next quasar they fucking discover or the next fucking frozen pizza they can put in a fucking drawer and turn into like 10 pizzas like the fishes and loaves. It's going to be starting with people coming together in a grief that's proportional to what's been taken away from us. If not permanently, in a way that we can't possibly continue to ignore and say that we're interested in peace in the world. At least not those of us who can sense with that level of our mind. A house in which I ended up being butchered essentially by two young men, both Christians. I had a white piece of art paper on my wall, and with green paint I painted the moon in a circle, and I painted a green evergreen tree on top, like a Christmas tree, with no decorations. And I wrote something in paint, and it said, making the unconscious conscious, or you might say the subconscious conscious, with a ritualized approach to life, or art and life. And in that same house, those two men completely sexually mutilate and abuse me. And neither one of them to this day thinks they did anything wrong. And it's simply setting boundaries and saying, look, wherever you're coming from, whatever you're projecting onto, whatever you think I'm doing, no, you can't steal my things. No, you can't go into my room. And they were accusing me of being a drug addict for complaining about it. There was such a complete reversal and polarization of their mind that the more I said no, the more they escalated their violence, the more convinced they became that there was something wrong with me, to the point that while in a sling with a dislocated shoulder, this man who's only been in my house for a few weeks and has tried to coerce me to have to leave it on pain of being mutilated, is looking at me with his Christian compassion and saying, there's a lot of pain there. A man who works with disabled people, who has just disabled another human being, who has spent the last 2 months saying, please leave me alone. I'm going to college. This is my house. You're a guest here. And within 12 hours, he moves his shit out and leaves. Is that because I have so much pain? Thank you, Captain Obvious. You just dislocated my shoulder and most of my ribs. What are we dealing with? And of course, he wasn't the only one involved. What are we dealing with? What is this? What is this? Is it at least something about what I've been talking about today? Does that help us at all? Does it offer us some explanation, even if it would never be satisfying, but at least it's better than nothing? Of course, as Christians, what are they learning? They're learning about scapegoating Jesus, who's basically anyone and everyone. That whoever you single out for that, that's something that's good. Don't worry, they'll come back to life. You don't really see what's happening to Jesus. You don't see whether or not he's innocent or not. You don't attribute to Jesus the kind of feelings that a human would have if he was taken along and used as a sacrificial Messiah. You don't actually get to really sit with him and feel like that he might be afraid about that. He just goes into the Garden of Gethsemane and goes, "Oh Lord, things are looking tough, but I'm glad the plan is all working out the way it's supposed to." Like, what the fuck? Right? Taking all your sins away, and you feel better when it's done, right? You do it in your mind. Oh, wow, thank you, scapegoat. I feel a lot better now, because everything about us really can't help but need, by the very first breath, to have as though demanded from the need of God himself, who is the ultimate standard for all things and all love, to kill an innocent child and treat them like a 33-year-old man, and get people to worship stories about how everyone should be so fucking goddamn grateful to be included in ceremonial fucking witchcraft. They say that heaven is that much closer and my heart is that much deeper and the world is that much better, sinful and disgusting as it is, because the grace of the Lord has found me. Fuck you. But useful it would be, I think. Useful it would be, says Yoda, to see what's really happening. Is that you end up training people to be able to accommodate a kind of violence that erupts not ever in a single person, but in a family and in a group that is stimulated, or could be potentially stimulated, only by the cries of its victim. Someone with an adequate supply of blood and information to their neocortex saying no to something that stands in the way of you or any number of people getting what they want, which is maybe you or that scapegoat. Out of the way. Out of the way. Because we don't speak your language the way the predator never speaks the language of its prey. And it irritates them, right? The only language you're speaking is you're asking for a one-way trip to the hospital. And even when you're there, well, consequences, my friend, consequences. Besides, don't you feel better now we all get that out of our system, even though none of them have to go to the hospital? And as they creep on you for weeks and weeks and weeks, and you think you would learn that lightning is going to strike, my friend. Lightning is going to strike, and when it does, you're going to be the one it strikes. And I have told this RCMP officer who talked to me not long after that, because the same people tried to have me arrested in my home for saying something of the likes of, "Brother, I don't think I'm related to you anymore." Okay? That's why he was there, threatening to kick down my door. Because he was so convinced by males and females involved in this situation and how unbelievably bad I must be, that I went to see him and half articulated this thought about how I somehow seem to become among my family or these types of people a focus of a lot of negative attention. And he looked at me like he'd learned something important and went to my family and said, "Yep, I think your son is a total criminal. I think he's a psycho. I know what kind of person he really is." And I have parts of my body dislocated. By the way, I tell him this. He doesn't investigate, doesn't even call the hospital to find evidence of this. He doesn't need to, because no one could possibly believe that these people would be lying, right? It would mean that all these people had duped him, while as this one person was such an incredibly brave human being that he could endure all of this and still be able to articulate a little bit about what's wrong. And having done nothing more wrong than said, "Please don't hurt me." Right? Please don't hurt me. Even the police officer started to escalate because it's like a feeding frenzy. And anything the scapegoat can say that you can hear, you're going to hear in the worst possible way. All you hear the scapegoat going is, kill me, you'll feel better. My Father is waiting for me. You'll make heaven and earth the way it should be if you just get rid of this mentality that this creature has to complain about something they call the pain you're apparently giving them. Well, fuck them. Those crazy Pop-Tarts. They're ruining our good time. Well, they're going to make our good time now, aren't they, baby? And how unconscious it can be, because you don't think about your worship of Jesus being connected to this. Scapegoating. Study it. Scapegoating. And how groups of people, anyone, can lose their inhibitions. And how, this way, they would lose their inhibitions about doing things that they don't probably think, even to this day, they would ever normally do. Like, you're looking at it the wrong way. You're putting a different lens on it, man. Right? You don't know what you're talking about. Well, as the victim, I do know what I'm talking about. Because what you did gave me catastrophic changes to my life that I didn't really want. And there isn't a good reason to this day that I had to go through that. Doesn't that bother you? I can understand if I had grenades strapped around me and I was jumping around saying, I'm going to kill you in the name of a God. But I wasn't. I was a 150-pound soaking wet poet going to school, trying to put his life together, after already being stalked and beaten by other members of his family, and just wanting to have his own little apartment with his brother and have some kind of life where I didn't have things stolen in my room, and a father who came to prey on me and stir up the kind of energies that would produce much more of the same that I had when I lived with him, because every home I go into, anything connected to my father, people get hurt. That's what his disease demands, right? And it needed my flesh. And the same person, the people can do that, they can't explain it. The victim can, or the victim can hear me. I can explain it. But who do you explain it to? A therapist? Do you think therapists are versed in scapegoating and group sociopathy? How groups of people can lose their inhibitions in a way that allows violence to happen to people. It's never just one-on-one. Violence happens to people because any number of things have changed that make it inevitable, that are being sustained by the efforts and the denial of any number of people in any professional, social, or religious association. The inciting conditions for the membership, attending the membership in that association, being problems with the dislocation in one's own development and family for generations, that any of those groups, and none of those groups, and not all of those groups combined, will ever solve. And that is called magical thinking. It is the pathology of the magical thinking attending the most negative vortices involved with the economics and the economic and industrial imagination of what humans have to be and do and feel, and what parameters they end up resorting to or confining themselves to explain anything that needs explaining, from the moon landing to the pain in their heart. And then start trying to tell other people how to do whatever magical bullshit they've learned to make it feel like they've done that, without ever having to look at the details. Tell me that you've done that. Tell me that you understand magical thinking. Tell me you understand how it works. It's like an electrician saying, I can light up the Eiffel Tower, and I don't even know what a transistor fucking is. You have to tell me you know something about magical thinking to tell me that you know how to solve violence. If you don't know anything about violence. You'll never solve it. You'll just be making interesting plays and books about it, so we can be thoroughly titillated and entertained by it, the way that people end up sustaining a capacity to allow, to thirst for, and hunger for as though their own survival, and that of various group mentalities. The unnecessary violence to innocent people. In how many ways do we keep that up? It's raining, I put this away. Let's see what time it is.